Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the Spark podcast. My name is Jack. I'll be your host, and today we're going to talk about one badass motherfucker from history, Simo Hayha. I'm not too sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but I don't think it's very important. Well, it's obviously very important to him and to anyone who's Finnish, but I don't speak Finnish, so I can't possibly know if I'm pronouncing that right. I've looked at I've watched some YouTube videos of people talking about it, and it sounds like Simo Hayha. But anyway, we'll mosey on. This guy is the most badass man I have ever, like scarily so, and factually so. And to kind of understand why I think he's very badass, we need to look at the time period he was active in. We'll say active. We're pre-World War II Europe, like just beforehand, at the very beginning of it. It was when Stalin and Hitler had the Nazi-Soviet anti-aggression pact, which was shaky, to say the least. So, basically, Stalin was like, oh, you should probably get some more defensible lines against the Germans, or against the Nazis, just in case they decide to go mad and attack us. And he decided to try and take a bit of Finland. And it didn't really go too well for him, let's say. So, this war, we'll call it, between Finland and the Soviet Union is known as the Winter War, or the Finno-Russian War, I believe. But it was less than 2 years before the Soviet Union faced off against Nazi Germany, and it just decided to attack Finland to try and get a bit more land. It began in 1939 when Soviet leader Joseph Stalin looked to expand his influence over Eastern Europe. He started citing concerns of a potential attack by the Germans. He demanded that the Finnish border be moved back 16 miles to create a buffer zone around the city of Leningrad, which is nowadays called St. Petersburg. He also demanded several Finnish islands in the Gulf of Finland and to lease territory on the Hanko, I think it's pronounced Hanko, Peninsula. It's spelled Hanko. So he wanted to lease land on the Hanko Peninsula in order to construct a naval base. Now, as you can imagine, the Finns didn't really want to give away a lot of their land, or islands, or a peninsula. Because if you give something to the Soviets, if you loan it to them, I don't think you're going to get it back. So, despite obviously not giving in to demands, the Soviets actually offered them a large part of their own territory as part of the deal. The Finns turned this down because they were suspicious of the Russians. Sorry, I keep saying Russians. They were Russians. The Soviets. Rightly so. I'd be suspicious of anyone who's made a deal with Hitler and has done... If you know anything about Stalin, that man did a lot to his own country that is just despicable. He made it a world-leading power from a third-world country in like 20 30 years. Went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being one of the most powerful. It was nuts. But he did it by murdering everyone who was lazy. Lazy in inverted commas that he saw. Stalin's going to be another episode. He's a very interesting character, and I feel like people don't understand how evil that man is. But anyway, on November 30th, 1939, the Soviets invaded Finland with 500,000 troops. Now, if you're Stalin in this situation and you've got the Red Army, you're pretty much just going to be like, yeah, we can take over Finland. It'll be no problem at all. We'll be over there in 2 weeks and we're just going to take over the whole fucking country. We wanted 16 miles, but fuck them. They weren't playing ball, so we're going to take over the whole fucking country. So he was like, fuck it, 500,000 troops will do. If we need more, we need more. Though vastly outnumbered and outgunned, the Finns had the advantage of fighting on home turf, though. They were led by Marshal Carl Gustaf Mannerheim. I hadn't heard of this man before now. Well, I had heard the name Mannerheim before. I don't know if it was in context of this war that I'd heard it before, but I'm going to have to go check that. He seems like an interesting guy, from what I can tell. And their plan, the Finns' plan, was just to hunker down behind a network of trenches, concrete bunkers and field fortifications while they repelled the Soviet tank assaults. They also used guerrilla tactics, with Finnish ski troops using the landscape to carry out hit-and-run attacks on isolated Soviet units. So basically what they'd do is they'd use their small submachine guns to just ski in, shoot a load of Soviets and just ski away again. It was surprisingly effective because the freezing Finnish winter also slowed down the Soviets, and the snowy terrain made them easy to spot. They weren't exactly wearing snow camouflage in a snowy area. You think this is stupid, but it wasn't really a common thing back then to wear all white camouflage. But it went pretty well for the Finns. They were kind of they were killing a lot of Soviets, let's say. The Finns put up a good resistance, but they were no match for the sheer numbers of the Red Army. There's just an onslaught, a total onslaught. The Russians have this tactic that has been around for millennia, and it's still here because it works. It's just, don't fuck around with tactics, just throw everything you have at them. If they keep killing your men, just throw more men at them. That's what the Russians had. They had millions of men. They're just throwing bodies at them and to see what happens. In February 1940, the Soviets actually overran the Finnish defences with the help of huge artillery bombardments. This was the biggest artillery bombardment, I think, since World War One. So they just started firing massive rounds in and throwing bodies at them, and with the Finnish, with their forces low on ammunition. Jeez, I just punched the microphone. Getting too excited about this. But the Finnish forces were low on ammunition and on the brink of exhaustion because they just didn't have enough men. They agreed to sign peace terms the following month. Just in a sheer numbers point of view, on paper, the Finnish lost the war officially because they had to secede 11% of their land to the Soviet Union. But over 3 months, there was 65,000 casualties for the Finns. But for the Red Army, there was 300,000 casualties. So that is a massive difference. That is an insane difference. And that was the most conservative number I found. That was on history.com. There was another website. Let's see if I can find the... I think it was War History Online that I found that it said that they had 500,000 casualties, the Red Army did. And it's hard to tell because they weren't great at keeping records, the Red Army. They were like, we don't have enough men really. If everyone dies, it's fine. We'll just throw more men in it. But it's a staggering difference between losing 65,000 men for the Finns and 300,000 at least for the Red Army. So I'm not going to say a large part of the Soviets killed in that army came from one guy, but a considerable amount. The man we're going to talk about today, Simo Hayha. He's also known as the White Death. There's been a lot of, I suppose, confusion about what the White Death term means. It is specifically about Simo Hayha. I've read a lot of books that refer to the White Death as the entire Finnish army coming in with their guerrilla tactics on skis and wearing their white. Now, they were probably referred to as the White Death, but this man is the White Death. He has been credited with at least 505 confirmed kills. Yeah, Think about that. That war was 3 months long. 505 kills. He served for 98 days. That is more than 5 men per day. He shot and killed at least 5 men per day. There are other reports that state that he's killed 542 men. And there's a bit of discrepancy, because some sources say that he has killed 542 men with his rifle, and other sources say that he has killed 290. I think it's 219. Where do I have this written down? Okay, maybe I have it roughly as 200. I think it was 219 was the number. So there's some reports that say he's killed 542 men with a rifle and 219 men with a submachine gun. I think there's been a bit of confusion that he had killed 542 men altogether, of which 219 were submachine gun, but it's unclear and I cannot find the facts, so it's possible that he has killed 542 men with a rifle and 219 with a submachine gun, so he killed at least 700 people. That's insane for one man. But that's inconclusive, but I do know he officially has killed at least 505 Soviet soldiers. Which is fucking crazy. Alright, we're going to talk a bit about his life and his kind of methods. But it just blows my mind that 505 confirmed kills at least. He was born in a small farming village in 1905. He wasn't a big man. He was 5 foot tall, exactly. So he could fit into small places. That's important. Remember that. He completed his year of mandatory military service when he was 20. So this was in 1925. This was far before the war. This is just after World War One. So after that, he returned to his life, his normal life of farming, skiing, and hunting. He was rather unsurprisingly known in his community for his ability to shoot, and he liked to enter shooting competitions. I imagine he won all of them. I can't see anyone beating this guy. It's just crazy. So when the Red Army invaded in 1939, he was called into action. He took his own M2830 rifle with him. This is an antique Finnish variant of the Mosin Nagant rifle. It's a rather, I suppose, famous or infamous, one or the other, gun. Made famous probably by Enemy at the Gates, or any Russian movie really where they're firing rifles, and more importantly and more relative to me, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where that was my favorite gun. It was great. I killed a lot of people with that. Maybe not as many as this dude, but fucking it's a big number to go against. The gun he used was a bare bones, just normal M2830, with no scope or accessories, and it was also zeroed at 150 meters. 150 meters was like the I suppose the average fighting distance at the time that they had worked out. He liked it because it was a relatively short rifle, and he believed he could get a better feel for it. Excuse me. He believed he could get a better feel for the shot with a shorter rifle, and I trust him. He was given heavy all-white camouflage, which was necessary for the minus 20 degrees Celsius weather in the snow, where the snow was like several feet deep in some areas. So the snow is nearly as tall as he is in some places, and he's got this big white coat, so you just can't see him. He preferred to work alone, unsurprisingly, as a lot of snipers do. What he did was he supplied himself with a day's worth of food and several clips of ammunition every morning before he snuck off into the woods. He'd go looking for a good spot with a lot of open space. Well, not a lot of open space, but with a good viewing area. and he would lie in wait for the Soviets to stumble across him. And there was a lot of them that stumbled across him. As I've said, over 98 days of service, he shot and killed at least between 505 and 542 Soviet soldiers with his rifle. That's what one source says, and it also says that there are also unconfirmed reports of him killing roughly 200 Soviets with submachine gun fire. Now, because he enjoyed skiing, I imagine he was one of these ski troops that was skiing in and shooting people with the submachine guns. I imagine. I can't know for sure. This is just things I've pieced together, but I do know he has killed at least 505 people with a rifle. That's a lot of deaths, man, to deal with. He preferred to use iron sights rather than scopes because he felt it gave him a more precise target to aim at, and he wanted to avoid giving away his position with the reflection on the front of the lens. So if you see in, like, I think it was one of the James Bond movies, where I can't remember what movie it is, but you see in sniper movies where they're sniping people and you can see him in the distance. There's a little reflection off the scope. That actually happens in real life. From what I hear, I've never been in a situation where I've had a sniper rifle pointing at me that I know of. But he didn't want that to give away his position. He's very good at not giving away his position. He developed an almost foolproof way of not being sighted. He would build up snowdrifts around his position to obscure himself, and just make banks of basically a fortification out of snow, so you couldn't see him at all. The snow banks would also serve as padding for his rifle and prevent the force of the gunshot from stirring up a puff of snow that his enemies could use to locate him. So he's a very sneaky, very accurate, small little man with a rifle who's going to blow your head off. He would also put some snow in his mouth to stop the steam from giving his breath away. If you've ever seen Enemy at the Gates, which if you haven't, go watch it. It's great. It's fantastic. It's not very accurate to what happened in real life. But that's where they get it from. It's about a different sniper. Vasily Zaitsev. He was a Russian Red Army sniper. And he came along after Simo Hayha. I think Simo Hayha was a big inspiration for, because he's a real person. It's Vasily Zaitsev, and he was basically Russian propaganda and lauded as the best sniper of all time. But we have the facts now, and Simo Hayha is, if you're going on skill and kill count, which I do. So before long, Simo Hayha had earned a reputation among the Soviets. He was the White Death, the tiny sniper who could not be seen and waited for you in the snow. Imagine how terrifying that sounds. There's a tiny, like, you're in Finland and you're surrounded by your Russian buddies and they're telling you about this tiny sniper out beyond that fucking blizzard who's going to blow your head off if you venture out on your own. He became the subject of Finnish propaganda, and in the people's minds became this sort of legend or guardian spirit that was protecting Finland. And again, this is reminding me of Vasily Zaitsev and his whole propaganda machine with the Red Army. So I'm pretty sure that he is where the inspiration came from. Simo Hayha was awarded an honorary Model 28 rifle by Finnish High Command for services done. This was before the war ended. He had been so effective that they were like, give him a medal. It wasn't a medal, sorry. Give him a gun. Give him a nice shiny gun. It was like a custom built thing just for him. It was amazing. There's a picture of him. If you look it up, just look up Simo Hayha Model 28. And you'll see him holding his rifle, smiling. This is before the war ended, and you can tell because 11 days before the war ended, a Soviet soldier caught sight of him and shot him in the jaw with an exploding bullet. That's unfortunate. He was in a coma for 11 days, and awoke as the peace treaties were being drawn up for the end of the Winter War. He has, if you look up photos of him, you can see his face was actually scarred for life afterwards. It's quite an awful looking wound, but he survived, man. This guy is so badass. He killed 505 people and was shot in the face and survived. And he was, well, I suppose he was in the coma for 11 days, so he's done his time. After the war, his hometown became part of the Soviet Union because they had taken over 11% of the land of Finland. But he continued to use his skills and became a successful moose hunter. He would actually regularly go on hunting trips with the former Finnish president Urho Kekkonen. On his time in the war, he is quoted as saying that anyone would have done it. There was nothing special that he had done. Anyone who was able to shoot should have done what he had done. He was just protecting his homeland, which is something that's very humbling or terrifying when you remember this man has killed 500 people, at least 500 people. And he's just like, yeah, just a regular day at the office, I got up and I checked in with my buddies, made sure everyone was okay, got some rations and got a few clips of ammunition, went off and killed 5 people and came back, and then got up and did it again the day afterwards for 100 days. Oh my god, it's just insane. And I believe he was a nice guy. I really want to believe it, but it's just a staggering amount of people he has murdered. And I know it was the Red Army and they're invading his homeland, but he still killed 500 men. It's too much. That's too many men to take with you. It's like people go on about Vasilis Zaitsev or Chris Kyle or God knows who else as the greatest sniper of all time. But this guy just takes the cake. He is way above everyone in terms of, I believe, skill level and kill count. It's just staggering, and it didn't even slow him down. The man lived until April 1st, 2002, and he died aged 96. The man killed 505 people, was shot in the face, spent a lot of time out in the freezing cold, and lived to 96. I'm going to be lucky to make it at 70. If I could make it to 96 without being shot in the face, it'd be a miracle. This guy was shot in the face with an explosive round. And it's nuts. He's he's one of the most interesting characters I've learned about in my history studies. I studied history as part of secondary school. I did want to do my project on Simo Hayha, but there's just not enough material out there. He's not as famous as a lot of other snipers, and he didn't have a major effect on the war as a whole. Not like Vasilis Zaitsev did. So I do draw comparisons between them. Obviously, I believe from what I've studied that Simo Hayha was the more literally effective sniper, killing more people and all that, but the propaganda machine that was Vasilis Zaitsev almost led the Red Army to repelling the Nazis completely and just coming back and trying to basically winning the war against them. But as I said, he's one of my favorite characters from history. I hope you enjoyed learning about him. If you want to learn more, just Google him, man. Go find out more. And I'm going to say thank you for watching. Or not watching. God, I've been... that is a fucking remnant from YouTube. Thank you for listening. I'm too tired. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Okay, that episode was one of the ones that was actually pretty clear. What the fuck am I saying? It was pretty close to my heart. It was a topic that I've always wanted to talk about with people. It never really comes up in everyday conversation. You don't really go to the pub and be like, hey, who's your favorite sniper from history? Or who's your favorite historical figure? Not to say Simo, as I think Stalin might be still. But anyway, that was a great episode, I think. I'm happy I finally got some justification for learning so much about this guy. I actually did something with it rather than keeping it in my head. And it was fun to learn a bit more. The numbers thing, I can't find out. I can't find out if it was 505, it was 542, or if it was fucking 790. Nobody fucking knows. Nobody can tell me. There's loads of variation, but it was a fuck ton of people. I'm recording this a bit early because I'm going home for the weekend, so this should hopefully be up on a Saturday. I'm trying to schedule that. Hopefully it'll work. If it's not, it might be up on a Sunday when I get home. But next week, I'm going to use my college learning to talk about something. For those of you who don't know, I am a biomedical engineer, and next week we're going to talk about what I think are the most interesting biomedical devices that I work with every day. Most interesting because they're a lot different than what I thought they were before I actually worked on one. We're going to talk about defibrillators and what they actually do and how effective they really are and why the fuck they came into existence in the first place. What kind of madman thought of this fucking thing? But yeah, that's for next week. Tune in then. Bye bye.